It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice right now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. Boy, have we got a lot of stuff to go over today. You know, I want to talk this morning about Obamacare security. They knew long before October 1st the site was insecure. We're going to talk about it. And the topic or the theme of today is going to be the fact that we have now breached what I believe is the point in time where Americans have to recognize we've reached a point of no return. We've breached the threshold. Our second topic, Common Core. The times they are a-changin'. Again. I mean, what a joke. What they're teaching our students today is intended to not drive education, not drive literacy, not drive history, not educate them about the world around them, but about social injustice, about environmental injustice, about how they should feel guilty for white privilege, Christian privilege. I mean, the nonsense just never ends. Third topic, debt ceiling. By the way, I'm going to talk to you about an opportunity for you, if you're local, to attend a Common Core meeting tonight. Make sure that you're there. Debt ceiling time. Care to watch the cave-in? Here we go again. Our fourth topic, be afraid. Be very afraid. Where we are at this stage in our history of our nation is a nation of lawlessness. And the lawlessness of the present president knows no boundaries. And so I'm going to suggest and make a recommendation that you say a prayer this morning for our nation. And I don't care if you're religious and just maybe spiritual. I don't care if you're an atheist. Pray to whatever it is that you pray. But it's time for America to look towards guidance for where we are, because I got to tell you, folks, it's getting really, really ugly out there. Let's tackle our first topic. Headline from the Free Beacon: Obama administration knew of healthcare.gov security risks before the launch. They knew in advance that there were 19 major security breaches and vulnerabilities. And yet, they went ahead and launched anyway. Now, I got to tell you, this is so far over the top, because what really matters here is this is private, personal information, financial information, and if yesterday's expose or news on 40 million Americans having their personal information captured or hacked from Target, I think it was Target, yeah, doesn't educate you about the risks associated with having all of your information online, nothing will. If this was Amazon, if this was IBM, if this was Feebay, if this was Facebook, or any other type of online portal, any type of shopping site, any type of site where you're required to put in your personal information, if this was a hospital, The left would be screaming for an investigation. The right would be apoplectic. They'd be having kittens over this. They'd be railing about the, quote, risk to the American people, the hard-working taxpayers, throwing in all the right keywords and doing their best kabuki theater imitation of a concerned representative. Well, I represent the people. The hell you say. But it isn't. This isn't Amazon. It's not IBM. It's not FeeBay. It's not FakeBook. This is the federal national government. This is the same federal national government that gave themselves a waiver of their own law on security, their own rulings on security risks. Did you know that there are 14 states that have implemented their own state exchanges? And that if any of them are hacked or your information is exposed, they are required by law to provide you with notification of that. So is Target, which is why the news came out. So is any bank. So is any entity, period. If you have online information that you gather on your customer base, your clients, your whatever, you are required by law to notify them if you're hacked. However, the federal government in our case has waived that little requirement for themselves, and only themselves. The states are required to notify you, 14 of them. But the federal government is not. Because this is the most lawless administration in the history of our nation. It's one that our founders would have either removed constitutionally or they would have revolted against violently decades ago. How can I make such a bold statement? Well, they did it. That isn't supposition. That isn't some vague idea. They did it. They wrote a Declaration of Independence. They declared that tyrants who abuse their power and authority and usurp power from the citizens is not a ruler that they were willing to live under. But the fault is ours, ladies and gentlemen. It is not the fault of this administration. I expect tyrants to do exactly what tyrants do. Expecting a different result from them would be foolish. The fault is ours. And therefore, the fix must be ours. Are you up for it? Are you up to fixing the problems that we have allowed to grow right underneath our feet? Any answer other than yes on your part is an acceptance of slavery. It's a willingness to go into that dark night, meek, mild, cowering in fear. It's a willingness to march blindly in fear to your own unarguable death. It is an acquiescence, an acceptance of your position as a slave and a peasant. It is your unquestioning willingness to be treated as livestock, to be bought and sold, to be traded, to be castrated, and eventually, when your usefulness has expired, to be culled. They knew. They knew long ago. We hear Darrell Issa in a hearing say, "This shows a disturbing lack of judgment." With all due respect, this doesn't show a disturbing lack of judgment. This shows an unwillingness to follow the most basic concepts of government's sole functioning role, that of protecting the people. There's a big difference there. There's a chasm so vast, it cannot be bridged. The truth of the matter is, no Congress is going to fix this for us. They have capitulated. They have sold themselves. They've been coerced, co-opted. They've been sidelined, emasculated, castrated. They're impotent. We have 535 eunuchs sitting up there in Capitol Hill. We have a slave master who's intent on the utter desolation of our nation. Every action, every move, every political step. You see, if you look at a situation and you say, some of these can just be honest mistakes. I mean, maybe it's just bad judgment. This isn't a disturbing lack of judgment, folks. A disturbing lack of judgment is a singularity. It may even be multiple singularities strung together. But we've gone far beyond that. We're way past that. We're at the point where these aren't singularities. These are willful and intentional destructions. See, the problem that we have at this stage is that we have an administration and a whole group of people behind him that have willingly stepped to the fore and are willing to do whatever is necessary to accomplish some agenda, quite frankly, I think most of them don't even understand. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government. Not old government, not a modification of it, not a replacement of the same people time after time, election cycle after election cycle. To institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such a form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety, note the key word safety, and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And with that, most of us would agree. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind is disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. In other words, we will sit here and tolerate the intolerable for a very long time. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, What is that same object? Total domination. When a long train of abuses and usurpations pursues invariably the same object and evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. That's excerpted. Why? Because that's the part that I wanted you to focus on. But now I want you to hear the premise under which it was designed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Are you consenting as the governed? Are your unalienable rights to life, liberty, and your pursuit of happiness, are they being secured by this government? A government instituted, designed, created by men to do one thing: to protect your rights that they haven't allotted to you, they haven't delegated to you, they haven't gifted to you. They were in existence long before government. See, the truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, our government was designed to do one functional thing: protect us and our rights from diminution, from being whittled away, from being reduced or marginalized, infringed. And in that task, government has utterly, miserably, and epically failed. And that is a fact. It's not an optional question for discussion. It's clear and obvious. Irrespective of what side of the political fence you sit upon, both parties and the entire infrastructure itself is in collapse. Today, they broaden the Obamacare exemptions. Well, the fact of the matter is, these people haven't gotten their insurance act together, so we're just going to open it wide open and say that if you haven't been able to get onto Obamacare's healthcare.gov website, you can just go out and buy yourself one of those plans that offers you the ability to have catastrophic care. Well, the truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, that the catastrophic care plan that's out there still has to adhere to the Obamacare policies, and what's worse, because it's adhering to those policies and requirements, it's often more expensive than even the bronze plan. Forget the silver and the gold. And isn't it funny that a nation that lives exclusively on a fiat currency acknowledges the preciousness of silver and gold and platinum? I want to remind you to take advantage of one of our sponsors, the Battery Station. They're at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains. Their phone number is 417-257-7799. Their website is batterystation.com. They're a great friend of this program. I would encourage you to participate with them. And also, I want you to, whenever you work with them in any way, shape, or form, whether you go in or you call them on the phone or you visit them on their website, when you're communicating with them, tell them that you heard about them from America's Voice Now. Tell them that Mike told you about them. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, we want them to know that their advertising works. And two, we want them to have an opportunity to take special care of you. Our sponsors are dedicated folks. We don't just take on any sponsors. These are people who come to us and say, I want to be part of what you're doing. They have an outstanding lineup of products. They've got a lot of ammunition, by the way. You know, they're not just a battery station. They carry military-grade sleeping bags. They carry freeze-dried food. We have our co-op bulk food program down there that you can participate with, where you can buy bulk food, 50-pound bags of food at wholesale pricing. It's only open to our listeners. Go down to the battery station, just walk in and say, Mike told me to come here and ask for the co-op catalog. They'll know exactly what to do. I'd also like you to participate with our friends over at Wits End Classic Barbershop. They're right on the square in West Plains. If you need a haircut, Jason over there, he cuts my hair. He's the only guy who does. Excellent job. Charges 10 lousy bucks. Does an excellent job cutting hair. And they have their new Patriot Cigar Bar open right behind there. It's not a bar. It's a Patriot Cigar, not really even a lounge. It's a cigar shop. It's a tobacconist shop. They've got pipe tobacco, cigars. They've got great gifts. If you're looking for a unique gift, they've got humidors. They've got lighters. They've got those cigar cutters. They've got pretty much anything that deals with cigars and that kind of thing. They have humidors in there where you can store your cigars in there and come in and have one. You're allowed to smoke in there, of course. Duh. They're located on the square. If you want to call the Patriot Cigar Shop, you can call them at 257-1776. It's the Patriot Cigar Shop. 417-257-1776. They can ship, so if you're not local and you want to buy some kind of a product, please do. Make sure that you're working with them. They're our sponsors. Get into Jason. Tell him, hey, Mike sent me over here for a haircut. He won't charge you 2 bits, but it's the equivalent of 2 bits. It's just inflation, folks. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to tackle our second topic, Common Core. And to utilize an old phrase, the times they are a-changin'. Again. You're listening to America's Voice. We'll be right back. All right. You know, you just got to come in on the right beat there or it just doesn't sound right, right? I love this bump music because this was written for me by a guy who lives in Romania. I know it's not country, but it's got style. It's got pow. It's got punch. It's got pizzazz. And I like it. And this is my show, so if I want to play that, I'm going to. You know, The other day, there was a proposal issued. This will kill you. By a Democratic state senator in Ohio, who's proposing that every homeschool parent should be investigated and approved by a social services agency before they should be allowed to teach their own children. You got to be kidding me. The truth is, if you look at the statistics of children who homeschool versus those who public school, they are better adjusted socially. They have better skills related to history, math, science. They understand geography. They can point to a place on a map and tell you where a country is. I never understood how it was that people could not tell me geographically where a country is. If I said to you, where is the Republic of the Congo? Well, the Congo, that's in Africa. I know pretty much where that one is. But if I spun a globe around and I said, now, quickly, point out the Congo, you might have trouble. If I said to you, show me, where on a map is Luxembourg? Show me, where on a map is Vietnam? Show me quickly, where on a map is the Philippines? Where's Japan? Where is the Sea of Irkutsk? Many of you couldn't do that. And almost none of our children in public school could do that. I learned it because I happen to like it. When I was a younger guy, I used to sit and take a world atlas and pore through it. And I'd allow my imagination to run wild and think about all of these exotic places I read about. And I'd study them and I'd look at their landmass, and I don't know why, and the language they spoke, what their political style or system was, what kind of a monetary system they used, and why. And I'd look at these maps and I'd look at cities, many of them unpronounceable, and I'd imagine what was it like to live in that little village or in that city. I'd look at what's the highest range of peak of mountain that I can what's the highest mountain range peak I can find? And is it savanna or is it mountainous terrain? And I read phenomenally. I read volumes and volumes and volumes. Not because my teacher told me to. I had a fourth grade teacher who gave me a book report assignment. And before that, I hadn't really read. I mean, I'd read, but, I read Tom, Dick, and Jane or whatever it was. I didn't really read. And he assigned me this assignment for a book report. And like most kids, I opened it up and I read the front jacket, the inside jacket, and I turned it over and I read the rest of the synopsis on the inside of the back jacket, right? Most kids do that. And I basically, wrote it down as best I could, and I handed it in. And Mr. Drum, he looked at me and he said, "Now, Michael, I know you didn't read this book." And, of course, I tried to buffalo my way out of that one. "Well, sure I did." And he said, "No, you didn't." And, of course, little did I know, here I am in fourth grade. He's been assigning this same book report for the last 25 years, right? He knows that book cover to cover. He's probably read it 1,000 times, and he's seen 5,000 book reports. And I thought I could, snow him. And Mr. Drum drummed all over me and said, I ain't buying it. He said, "Here's the deal. I know this book, and I've read it. And I know you haven't, because I can tell what you did. You read the inside jacket and the back jacket. And so here's what your assignment is." He used to make me count the holes in the chain link fence outside if I was, disciplinary. He said, "You can either count the holes in the fence, or you can write a real book report, and you've got to read this book within, by tonight. So I decided I was going to read the book and just do the book report because I really hated the fence counting, the holes in the cyclone chain link fence. I mean, that's what he would make us do. Count the holes in the chain link fence and tell him how many we counted. So I went home and I read that book. And I don't even remember the name of it. But I can tell you this. Something inside me caught that seed. I was blown away by what I learned. Because suddenly the rose of imagination in my mind went into full bloom. And it blossomed. In 6th grade, we had this brand new evolution called team teaching. 2 teachers separated by a folding door. And the teacher would roll back the door, and sometimes we'd have teacher A and sometimes we'd have teacher B. And at the back edge of the room, they had these bookshelves set up, and they had on both sides of the door. And suddenly, by about the, halfway mark in the year, I had been through almost every book on my side of the room. And I started in on the bookshelf on the other side of the room. And I read virtually every book that was in there. The only ones I didn't read were the Hardy Boys Mysteries for Girls. I can't remember what they were called, but they didn't really interest me. I wanted to read the boy books. And I read Westerns, and I read science fiction, and I had a library at home I still own. The entire classic works of Robert Louis Stevenson in the Thistle edition. And by the end of 6th grade, I'd read every one of those books. You know why I found the time to do that? Because when my brother and I were about 7 or 8 years old, we were fighting, as boys will do, over the television set. And these are the days when you actually had to manually flip the old channel, and you had to pull the button out and turn it for volume. And we were fighting about the volume and back and forth, and snap, we broke off that knob. And my parents came home, and we said, Jesse broke the TV. And Jesse said, I didn't do it, Michael did it. And we said to our parents, well, what are we going to do? And they said, nothing. And we said, well, what do you mean nothing? When are you going to fix it? And they said, well, we're not. And from the time that I was about 7 onward, we didn't have a television in my home. We didn't have a TV in my home until I was just about 18 and ready to move out. And I have one brother who is a classically trained pianist who went on to Westminster Choir College and toured the world singing. And another one who's a classically trained guitarist, who's one of probably the best guitarists I've ever seen. And I'm biased, but I'm not that biased. I know good guitar when I hear it. We had the time to do that because we weren't embroiled and sitting there reading the boob tube or watching the boob tube, as we called it in those days. Remember that? The boob tube? In fact, we used to have to go to our neighbor's house to watch assignments from National Geographic that school appointed us to watch. You got to watch something on killer whales, or you had to watch some National Geographic thing about science or space or something. And, it made a vast difference in my life. And I'll tell you why. Because today, my desire to read is just as insatiable now as it was then. I read everything and anything I can get my hands on. I never have a moment's boredom. And I could comfortably sit down with a library and not emerge for a week. No sweat. I can knock back 300 pages a day with my eyes closed. But I'm a high school dropout, no college education. I quit high school when I was 16 because I found girls and cars and pot. No interest going to school. Even when I was there, I wasn't there. Never a day's worth of college. But I have an excellent vocabulary. I'm a good speller. I have a command of the language. And all of that obtained through books. All of it. You see a word a million times when you're trying to figure out how to spell the word surveillance. It appears on your forehead. Magically. Auto-magically. But you see, that's not the world our children live in anymore. That's not the life we lead anymore. Reading is discouraged. Everything is now in snippets. It's all 146 characters on a Twitter feed. Half of that eaten up by some link that's not intelligible to the human eye. We're not encouraged to read stories anymore. We're not encouraged to allow the rose in our mind, the rose called imagination, to bloom. The only thing that you cannot learn from reading is math. You can learn science. You can learn history. You can learn geography, literature, spelling, English. You may struggle with some of the higher science concepts when you have to actually do labs, but for all intents and purposes, about the only thing you really cannot learn from reading is math. You have to do it. And therein lies a problem with our current Common Core. There's a mother in Arkansas the other day I saw in a video. I'll try to find it and post it up on AVN, and I'll make sure I put it in a link to it in the subject matter in this YouTube video. By the way, I'm going to start running these videos all in one for a whole day. I'm not going to break them into 4 anymore. And this woman read a math problem that her student child was given to a school board. When you hear it, you're going to be blown away. I wish I had it in front of me so I could play it for you, if nothing else. But then I was on Patriot FB this morning. PatriotFB.com is a kind of like a Patriot Facebook. And my show streams there live on an audio player, 8 to 10 o'clock. And there was a guy who posted something up there, one of the other members there. And I was kind of impressed with it, and I thought I'd read it to you this morning because I think it's indicative of where we are at. And a scenario similar to this happened to me the other day, and I'll tell you about it when we're done. But I'm just going to read it to you real quick. It's only a moment or two. Last week, I purchased a burger at Burger King for $1.58. The counter girl took my $2, and I was digging in my pocket for some change, and I pulled out 8 cents, and I gave it to her. She stood there holding the nickel and 3 pennies while looking at the screen on her register. I bet you can figure out what comes next, right? We've all experienced this recently. I sensed her discomfort, and I tried to tell her to just give me 2 quarters back. But she called the manager over for help. Why do I tell you this? Because of the evolution in teaching math since the 1950s. When math was taught in the 1950s, a problem read like this. A logger sells a truckload of lumber for $100. His cost of production is 4/5 of the price. What is his profit? In the 1960s, that same word problem changed to a logger sells a truckload of lumber for $100. His cost of production is 4/5 of the price. or $80. What is his profit? In the 1970s, it migrated a little further into the ridiculous. A logger sells a truckload of lumber for $100. His cost of production is $80. Did he make a profit? In the 1980s, it got even worse. A logger sells a truckload of lumber for $100. His cost of production is $80, and his profit is $20. Your assignment: underline the number 20. Teaching in the 1990s, it gets even uglier. A logger cuts down a beautiful forest because he is selfish and inconsiderate and cares nothing for the habitat of animals or the preservation of our woodlands. He does this so he can make a profit of $20. What do you think of this way of making a living? Topic for class participation after you answer the question is, how do the birds and the squirrels feel as the logger is cutting down their homes? There are no wrong answers, and if you feel like crying, it's okay. Now, in the 2000s, things got even uglier. Here's the math question now. If you have special needs, or just feel you need assistance because of race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, age, childhood memories, criminal background, then don't answer, and the correct answer will be provided for you. There are no wrong answers. In 2012, well, I can't even pronounce it because I don't speak Spanish. But basically, the entire question is in math, or the entire math question is in Spanish, and I can't read it for you. So, but the point is this: the other day I went to a local community theater, and there was a child sitting behind the window, one of the students, and this was a student community theater thing. And the girl was sitting behind the window, and I went up there and I slid my money across the counter, and she was sitting there keying in on her phone, as we see so many of our youth do today. And I thought to myself, boy, that's a little rude. I mean, here I am. She hasn't even looked at me or acknowledged me. You know, and as I slid it under, I've forgotten what I said, however many tickets. But she was sitting there with her with her phone, you know, typing keys rapidly. And I thought to myself, come on now, I'm a customer. Pay attention to me. At least look me in the eye. And suddenly she put the phone down. And as I looked down at it, I realized she wasn't texting someone. She was using the calculator function. Well, there was a long line of people behind me, and I thought to myself, my goodness. And she slid change up underneath the window, didn't count it out or anything, and I grabbed it and I hurriedly got out of line because I wanted the group of people to get in behind me. And I walked inside and I looked at the tickets and I counted through the change, and I realized she'd paid me too much back in change. She actually gave me too much back after calculating the total cost. And I mean, folks, I think it was 3 or 4 tickets I bought. I mean, it wasn't like it should have been a complicated process. And she could not figure it out. I had another instance where I was at a concession stand, and I was a parent assisting in the selling of, you know, the hot dogs and the popcorn and the sodas. Everything, there's no tax, and everything is on a round dollar figure. And I watched over and over and over as people came up, and, you know, you're parents standing there, but you're also monitoring the counter with, you know, the kids, and there's a cash box there and so forth. And over and over and over, I watched people come up and they'd order 2 sodas and 2 popcorns, or 2 sodas and 2 hot dogs, or whatever it was. And they would hand over a $20 bill. And there were actually 2. One was One literally had to use the calculator in his phone for every single transaction without fail. Even though many of them were the same repetitive transaction. It was like 2 sodas, 2 bags of popcorn. And if he got a $20 bill, he could not make change for $6. I mean, it was $2 for a soda and $1 for a bag of popcorn. So 2 sodas, 2 bags of $6. He'd get a $20 bill, and he could not make change. Every single transaction, over and over and over, whether it was a $10 bill, unless it was exact, he could not do the math. There was another kid that probably 50% of the time he had to use it. And I was stunned. The truth is, that is now the rule. It is not the exception. And the reason, ladies and gentlemen, I'm bringing all of this to your attention and I'm beating this issue up is because even before Common Core, our schools have turned into indoctrination centers. They're no longer about educating your child about the basic tools that they need to be able to be successful in life. They don't teach them to memorize the times tables. When I was a child, my father used to say to us all the time, and 5 boys now, right? No girls. So, we're a bunch of, it was like herding cats. And he'd sit us down and he'd make us go through our times tables over and over and over and over. My brothers and I still joke about it. We'll sit down at the table all together in those rare instances now as adults when we get together and somebody will say 6 8s and everybody will say 48. 7 8s, 56. We do it all the time. And the reason we do is because, it's kind of funny to us now. But kids don't memorize multiplication tables anymore. They can't do basic addition. Our math skills in this nation have fallen so far that we are, out of the developed nations, we're in the bottom like 2%. And Common Core promises to fix all this. Well, with all due respect, I can tell you this. Judging on that kind of comedic story I read you earlier, it's only gotten worse in the last 50 or 60 years. And Common Core is just the latest iteration of indoctrination. The problem, ladies and gentlemen, is that our schools are not designed and intended anymore to teach your child, your son, your daughter, your grandchild, your grandson, your granddaughter, your cousins, your nephews, your whatevers, to actually survive in this world. The reason why is because they are educating them to be dependent sheep. They don't want them thinking for themselves. They don't want them to be capable of thinking critically, of recognizing that this isn't right. They just want them to blindly accept what they're told. They're now taught social injustices. I read through my son's history book the other day, and frankly, if he wasn't so close to graduating from high school, I would pull him out of school altogether. And I was stunned at what I read. This is a history book, and the entire thing was based almost exclusively on social justice issues. And it wasn't about what transpired in history. It was about all of these silly questions about, well, why should women have been given the right to vote? And all of this social justice stuff. Not facts. It's all about emotion. All right, you're listening to America's Voice Now. Make sure that you support our folks that are our sponsors. I'll give them to you when we come back from this quick break. We're going to take a real fast one, and we're going to come back and talk about debt ceiling time. Do you care to watch the next cave-in? Here it comes. You'll see it in moments. Standard and typical.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right. Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. We are in our third segment of 4. It's currently the 20th of December. We're almost here at the holiday Christmas window. And we're about to get a fine present. Well, actually, we got a fine present last night from the Obama administration. They said, hey, if you don't have health care insurance and you haven't gotten it through healthcare.gov because, we're having all those pesky problems logging on, hey, I tell you what you're going to do. We're going to give you a chance. We're going to give you a waiver. We're going to unilaterally, dictatorially violate the law, and we're going to say you can sign up for any other kind of plan, and it's all basically on the honor system, and, we trust you. That's not the president I was talking about, though. We got an inkling of the president, or the present, when Jack Lew, the latest in a long line of bankers, came out and said to us that the danger is imminent. He's warned us again and again. On Thursday, the government could run out of borrowing room to help pay its bills as soon as February. Oh, my. Lions and tigers and bears. Oh, my. If lawmakers don't move swiftly to raise the nation's debt ceiling. Here's a 30-second spot from CNBC.
Ceiling on February the 7th, but what's interesting here is he's saying in this letter to the Speaker of the House that they don't have the extraordinary measures flexibility that they've had in the past. They say that even with the extraordinary measures, they're only going to be able to go as far as late February or early March, and that's because the nation is paying out so much money at this time of year in tax refunds. So they don't have the flexibility that they've had in the past to really string this thing out. There's going to be a political fight over this in Washington. It's going to be something that we have to watch.
Well, I would beg to differ, but I really don't think that there will be a political fight in Washington. One, the Republican Party, for all intents and purposes, capitulated and traded us off a week ago when they signed the newest budget deal. I know that's the budget, not the debt, but one affects the other. Jack Lew says in a letter to congressional leaders, I respectfully urge Congress to take action to raise the debt limit at the earliest possible moment. Need I remind you that Mr. Madison, the author, the father of our Constitution, said to us, crisis is the rallying cry of tyrants. So here we go again. One more time, and we're going to trip the light fantastic. What actually should happen? Well, what should happen is we should have no debt limit increase, and Congress, if they truly were representing the nation and their oath to defend and protect the nation from all dangers, foreign and, emphasis applied, domestic enemies, we would have no debt limit increase. We would have massive budget cuts. We would have the elimination of all programs that do not have a constitutional justification for their existence. We would have the elimination of most of the extra constitutional federal agencies that exist and the absolute ballooning budgets that they gulp down like big gulps now in New York City, now that the court has tossed out the nanny mayor's decree. We would have the elimination of virtually all of the extraneous grants that we spend money on. You know, the $300,000 to do this or the $500,000 to study that, the $1.5 million we have that we granted to somebody who wants to put up a website on books and poems. The $2 million study at Harvard to determine why lesbian women are fatter than straight women. It's a real study, folks. We would have an elimination of the spending and a massive reduction of regulations that cost the country money to adhere to. The estimate right now is that it costs the nation $200 billion of productive money every year just to make sure that all of the regulations that are out there are being followed. I mean, that's a pretty staggering sum of money, wouldn't you say? $200 billion. That's a lot of moolah. If ever a time should come when vain and aspiring men shall possess the highest seats in government, our country will stand in need of its experienced patriots to prevent its ruin. That was Samuel Adams. Why would he say such a thing? Well, because we've reached that point in time, ladies and gentlemen. We're already there. We've already achieved the point where virtually, it's almost at the point where all is already lost. And now we need our experienced patriots to stand up. I know it's unpopular, but I would remind you that Mark Twain said to us, "In the beginning of a change, the patriot is a scarce man, brave, hated, and scorned. When his cause succeeds, however, the timid join him. For then it costs nothing to be a patriot." So the question, I guess, is when we look at where we are today, there are no patriots in Congress. No one will step up and say, And all of these administrative agencies that create a spaghetti pot of law that is so convoluted, so tangled, that we can't even figure out how to get through it, will submit their budgets, increasing them sometimes by between 8 and 35%, because they have a demand now to put in the process and the additional staff and the people to ensure that all of these new regulations are followed. Well, Mr. Madison was also wise enough to tell us in Federalist Paper number 62, and here's what he said: "It will be of little avail to the people that the laws are made by men of their own choice. If the laws are so voluminous that they cannot be read, or so incoherent that they cannot be understood, if they be repealed or revised before they are even promulgated, or undergo such incessant changes that no man who knows what the law is today can guess what it will be tomorrow, Law is defined to be a rule of action. But how can that be a rule which is little known and less fixed? If that was not a prescient statement, I mean, it was like the guy had a crystal ball. It will be no comfort to us that the laws are made by people of our own choice. If the laws are so many, so vast, so numerically superior that they can't be read. It's not possible. I mean, the Obamacare regulations are 20-some-odd thousand pages, and folks, they've only worked through 1/3 of it, even though it's under implementation. They are so incoherent that they cannot be understood. No one can figure it all out. Lawyers can't. That's why we have to constantly have the courts jam-packed with lawsuits, trying to have some judge determine, what did all of this mean? If they're repealed or revised before they're even instituted, and that happens every day. I mean, we passed Obamacare to find out what was in it, and then wrote 20,000 pages of regulations to institute it. Constant, incessant changes. Repeal, waiver. If it undergoes such incessant change that no man can understand it, who knows what the law is today? Who can guess what it will be tomorrow? Business can't function like that. They need consistency. They need to know that the plan we've put in place today will be lawful tomorrow. That the rules that we have established and set in place for our manufacturing process, for the loans we've borrowed, that all of that is going to be functional. But when a business goes out to a enterprise banking institute and says, listen, we've got a brand new product, we need to ramp up production, and we need to buy $240 million worth of equipment to manufacture and produce this new thing. And they get the loan, and because they've got great credit and they've got a good track record, and they've got a distribution network set up. And then suddenly, they're 3 months into production, and the rules change. How do they recoup that $250 million that they now owe the bank when they have to shut down production because they're not allowed to distribute or produce or sell or whatever that product? The rules aren't fixed. Everything is fluid. Nothing is fixed. That's what law, that's what rules, that's what regulations are. They fix something in place and time. They freeze something. But when they're changed at whim and vacillation, back and forth, based on these bureaucratic people in these administrative agencies who have no idea what it's actually all about. They've never actually been on a factory floor. All of their education is academic. They've never done a practical, functional job in their lives. They have existed solely sucking on the teat of the taxpayers' largesse. They are plump, and they are round, and they are soft. And their experience is all based upon utopian fantasy, not reality. And they make all these decisions in a complete and total and utter vacuum. just to provide some level of credibility to their existence. I mean, the EPA, they just came out and said, under the new regulations, the military has to get rid of those pesky lead bullets. We can't have those lead bullets. They're polluting the environment of battlefields all over the world. I kid you not, folks. The new green bullet is coming to the military. I mean, we wouldn't want to pollute the environment with lead in a war. I mean, it's okay to kill babies and children and have collateral damage. It's okay to blow up buildings. It's okay to leave the ground pockmarked with toxic chemicals. It's okay for the blood to run in the streets. But we don't want to leave any pesky lead behind. And in that regard, let's shut down the last lead smelting plant in the United States, right there in Herculaneum, Missouri. Hey, guess what? When we shut down the Herculaneum lead smelter, it's the last one in the United States, so guess what's going to happen? You know what? Those crazy right-wing Second Amendment-loving, Bible-thumping, gun-carrying knuckleheads, those knuckle-dragging apes, their ammunition price is going to go through the roof. We'll get them pesky guns one way or the other. Well, now that the military is committed to switching over to green bullets by 2018, can we all get in line for the yard sale for the old, outdated, non-friendly bullets? I mean, that's the only question I have left. So what will happen as we move into the debt ceiling crisis? Well, we know what should happen. The real question is what will. So let me give you a little idea. Congress, both Republican and Democrat, will come out and perform for us. They're going to hoot and they're going to holler and they're going to banter back and forth and they're going to hurl insults at one another and tell each other how they are tragically affecting those good American, loyal, hardworking taxpayers, the hardworking American people that we are here to protect. Then they're going to do what they know they're always going to do right up until they do it. They're going to cave in. They're going to authorize another, $1.5 trillion. That's my guess. They're going to approve a $1.5 trillion debt increase in February. I'm not a gambler, so I'm not taking your bets on it. But that's my best guess, $1.5 trillion. They're going to add that onto the backs of our children because none of us are actually going to be here to pay it. They're going to add another 1,000 pounds of straws to the camel's back. This is the same camel who's standing there with so much weight on him right now, his legs are trembling as he tries to keep his feet. But then, at the closing of the session and as the gavel comes down, boy, it's off to the restaurant. Let's go out. What do you say, Bob? I know you're supposed to be on the other side of the aisle, but let's just get out to the restaurant and you and I, let's break the chain here and sit down and have a meal together. It's going to cost them $700. We're going to pay it out of political action committee money, PACs. We're going to order a couple of bottles of wine, $300, maybe $350. And we're going to talk about how we ought to do this more often. How if we just compromised more, things would be better. And then we're going to get into our chauffeur-driven vehicles by someone who holds the door. Before we leave, the owner of the restaurant's going to run up and he's going to say, Senator, can I get your photograph so I can put it on the wall to show that you've been here and you've made our restaurant famous? And then they're going to go home to bed. And they're going to walk into their multi-million-dollar townhouse in a gated community with private security and Secret Service, who's just kind of standing around behind the trees and the walls. It's the most exclusive and the most protected gated community in Washington. And the armed security is going to protect them from the little people. Please make sure that you work with our sponsors. They're the ones who keep America's voice on the air. It costs money to be on the air. It costs money to do all of this stuff that we do. I don't get paid, but it still costs money. It costs me money. These guys help at least defray it. I'd like you to go see our friend Jason over at Wits End Classic Barbershop. He's right on the square in West Plains. $10 all he charges for a haircut. He does my hair. I know, I'm breaking camera lenses every day, but he does a great job. He's a young fella. He's a strong patriot, and I appreciate him for what he does. He's right on the square in West Plains. If you'd like to call him, you can do that, but you don't need an appointment. It's 257-1776. That's also the number for the Patriot Cigar Bar that's in the back now. And you can go into that cigar lounge there, and there's some chairs there, and there's some televisions there. You can have a cigar. You can smoke a pipe. You can find great gifts for those people, lighters and anything related to the smoking business. You got humidors in there, and they got some T-shirts and things like that. Enjoy them. Make sure that you see our friends over at the Battery Station. Again, that number, by the way, for the Patriot Cigar Shop and the Barber Shop is 417-257-1776. Make sure you see our friends over at the Battery Station at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains. It's 417-257-7799. They have a website, which is batterystation.com. Kevin's a really good friend of mine. They are sending over a lot of stuff to our soldiers over in Afghanistan, as they do every year. This is their 8th year. It costs them thousands and thousands of dollars out of their pocket and inventory to do that. You're invited to, if you're local, to drop. They got a whole list of stuff that they need and can use. But if you can't find something on that list, or if you're not local and you'd like to help them defray the cost, you can certainly call them at 417-257-7799, or you can contact them via email at troops@batterystation.com. If you're local, go in there and ask them about our co-op. Tell them Mike from America's Voice Now sent me over here to ask for the co-op sheet. They'll know exactly what to do. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be returning in just a moment. All right. We're back. Thanks for breaking and riding with us today. If you're visiting us on our website, I appreciate that. You can always capture the show live on America's Voice Now, both audio and video. If you have a low bandwidth situation, the audio is an easy solution for you, especially if you're rural and you're working on a satellite with high delay, or if you've got dial-up or something like that, or if you've got a mobile phone and you don't want to eat up a lot of your bandwidth, you can utilize our live Spreaker application. That's on our website, and it's also on patriotfb.com. So you can go to americasvoicenow.org or .com. It's the same thing. And we've got a little player down there, and you can hit the play button, and you can listen to it live because we're broadcasting the stream live as we do the show. You can also jump on, and you can watch our video, and we'd like you to share that with folks that you think you can make a difference with that are in your circle of influence, right? Even if you think you can't make a difference. Oftentimes you'd be surprised at people's reaction. Sometimes I'll send somebody like an email and I'll say, hey, here's a story I'd like you to read. And I give them the reasoning behind it. And I'll say to them, hey, here's a video that kind of struck me as an important one for you to learn about. And these are people generally who are not allied with my way of thinking. And I'm trying to bring them, I'm trying to bring them to awareness. I'm trying to get them to wake up out of their slumber and realize, that things are not really as they seem. Generally, the idea is that I may have some influence on them in some way, shape, or form. They're people that know me or like me or they're friends or whatever the case may be. That's not true. There are people who like me. Stop that. But the truth is that it's my job to try to, wake people up from that sleepy slumber, to kind of bring them about and say, hey, you were just mentioning to me the other day about that Obamacare thing. Here's a video I think that would kind of help you to understand it. Or here's a story that I found the other day. Or sometimes I just write my own opinion out and I email it off, and sometimes they take the bait and sometimes they don't. But that is my circle of influence. You're part of it. And part of that job that we have as we move into, the scenario here is that we have to utilize our circle of influence to educate those people around us, because it's time for America to recognize the danger we're in. It's time for us to be afraid. Very afraid. It's time for us to realize that, for all intents and purposes, we're no longer living within a constitutional republic. In fact, really not sure at this point that you could define this as anything other at this stage in the game than a police state. But the media is not telling you that. If you think I'm wearing a tinfoil hat, you can go on living in denial. You can go on committing self-treason. That's the treason that, the heroin addict has, as he says to himself, listen, I could quit this anytime I want, but right now I'm just hang on, I'll be right with you. Yeah. That's the same treason that, the alcoholic says to himself as he gets up out of bed and he says, I just need this drink just to get me going. I'm not going to drink anything else today. I'm just going to take a couple of quick swigs just to get me straight. See, the self-treason that we engage in every day is the one that says, I know things are bad, but I can't do anything about it. The self-treason that we engage in is, if you're not one of the people who is completely, blinded to what's going on around you, this is the one where we say, well, I'm only one person. I vote. And that's all we really can do anyway. Well, 72% yesterday in a poll, 72% of all people polled, and there was, 1,100 of them. And I'm not a big fan of polls, but, because I think they can be slanted and misleading and, what is the old phrase? Lies, damn statistics and lies, or something like that. Look, anybody can manipulate numbers to make them look like anything, right? Anybody who hasn't gone to a Common Core school, but that's okay. 72% of all the people polled believe that big government is the United States of America's greatest threat. It's an article. It's in a Gallup poll from Fox. It's up on Fox News. And out of all those numbers, I was reading through them as I was getting ready to, kind of post this article up on our Facebook page and our website. And I'm sitting there and I'm reading this, and I got to the one at the bottom that says something very interesting. It said that 92% of the Republicans said big government is America's greatest threat. It also went on to say, kind of interestingly, that 56% of Democrats feel that big government is our greatest threat. That's actually kind of interesting because most people think, well, those Democrats, they're always into big government. I mean, they just want more and more and more government, and nobody should be responsible. Well, the truth is, when you look at the NSA spying, when you look at the National Defense Authorization Act, when you look at a lot of the things that are going on in government which make government big, it's the Republicans who put those into place. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because 92% of Republicans say government is America's greatest threat. Yet the Republicans are the ones who gave us the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act, where Americans can be held indefinitely. They're the ones who were supporting and backing the argument that the NSA should be able to have an inside look at every aspect of your life, every breath you take, every step you make. They should be able to look inside what you think, what you say, what you write, what you do, where you go, to keep us safe. From whom? I want to be kept safe from those people. I want to be kept safe from the people who think that it's okay to steal my liberty to keep me safe. 56% of all the Democrats polled said that big government is the greatest threat to the United States of America. So that's a majority percentage, a very, very significant majority when you talk about Republicans. It was 92%, and a pretty sizable majority for Democrats who say that big government is our greatest threat, not jihadi terrorists. Amazingly, though, 21% of all the people polled, their belief is that big business is the nation's greatest threat. 72% of everybody polled, both sides of the aisle, believe that big government is. 21% believe big business is. What that tells me is that 21% of all America, or at least those polled, all recognize fascism when they see it. Fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism, because it is a merger of state and corporate power. Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy. Fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism because it's a merger of state and corporate power. And I got to tell you, folks, that's where we are. What we have is a government that is really, at this stage in the game, operating as a enforcement arm for the corporatists who have effectively bought their police force. Not only a physical police force, but a legislative police force. When you can be legislated into buying something just to retain your citizenship and your legal standing as a citizen, that, ladies and gentlemen, is a merger of corporatism and government. That is utilizing the police power of government to force you to engage in commerce, which benefits corporatism. Now, there's plenty of people out there saying, I know what you mean. You're talking about Obamacare, and those insurance companies, they're not really making that much money. The government keeps messing with them too. Yes, I get it. But in the long term, in the long range, in the long plan, just think. Just think about how much money will flow from you and me into the coffers of the corporations who will implement Obamacare. And I'm not just picking on Obamacare. I can take the military-industrial complex and the war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq. I can take the war in Syria, which we're not even involved in, at least officially. I can take the NSA spying, which isn't, for all intents and purposes, even spying on us in this case. We're talking about those that are internationally spying. Somebody's getting paid to build the servers and to implement all of the data back-end work that has to be accomplished. Somebody made a lot of money building these massive hard drives like we just went up in Utah. 17 football fields in size. Uses 1.7 million gallons of water a day to cool these computers down because they run so hot. I mean, some firm got paid $200 million to build the Obamacare healthcare.gov website, didn't they? $200 million for a website is a pretty staggering sum. I mean, that would be like as if you came home and said to me, I'm so excited. I got me a brand new car, man. I'm telling you, I am pumped. I bought me a Ford F-150 pickup, man. Boom. Did you know that the Ford F-150 is the most popular pickup truck in America? And I got one. Oh, I say, congratulations. That's really great. I'm glad for you. How much are those darn things? I hear they're pretty expensive depending on how you get it configured. Oh, mine was good. I got it for the right price. You did? Okay, cool. Well, how much was it? Man, I got mine for $425,000. You how much did you pay for that truck? $425,000. And I got, man, I'm telling you, the interest rate is awesome. It's only 9%. And I got it on a 10-year loan. I mean, can you believe it? Paying $200 million for a website that doesn't work would be the equivalent of my continuing that little side story of the F-150 and then finding out that there was no motor in the truck and he had to tow it to get it here. And he still thought he had a good deal. Somebody's benefiting. Some corporations are making an enormous amount of money producing and manufacturing boots, clothing, mole vests and gear, food, batteries, flashlights, weapons, bullets, vehicles, cement, sandbag bags. I mean, recognize that the companies that make money on the offshoot of government programs, they don't want the money and the flow of gravy to stop. They're on a gravy train ride. I mean, Lockheed Martin, were it not for government, they wouldn't have a business. McDonnell Douglas. Okay, they might make an occasional commercial airplane, but let's be candid. That would be like going and taking Walmart and saying from now on they're only going to sell apples. Their business would be defunct. You know, when I used to have a retail store, I had a sporting goods store. And I, at the time, this is back in the early 2000s or 2003, 4-ish. And the premier product out there in those days was the Surefire brand of products, the Surefire flashlight series. And there was a couple, one or two other companies who've now have come up dramatically and improved the quality so that Surefire is really no longer the epitome of the flashlight, right? But at the time, they were the cat's meow. And I was a diehard fan of them. In fact, I still own Surefire flashlights. I own them since I've had them, and flashlights last forever, theoretically, as long as you take fairly good care of them. Especially these metal ones, you can toss them down the stairs and go pick them up, and they still light up. Well, I found out that when they signed the first National Defense Authorization Act, this is the one that allows indefinite detention of Americans based on a presumed belligerent act where you can be held indefinitely without access to the courts or a lawyer or your habeas corpus rights or your Fifth Amendment right, your Fourth Amendment right, your Sixth Amendment right, your First Amendment right. The one that says that government can basically accuse you of something, doesn't really have to prove it, doesn't even have to tell you what they're accusing you of, but can hold you indefinitely in detention until the end of the war on terror and the hostilities associated with it. For all intents and purposes, ladies and gentlemen, that's a life sentence. Because if you consider how we normally deal with wars, we've been fighting the war on poverty since the 60s, right? We've been fighting, 40s actually. We've been fighting the war on drugs since the 50s. And we're no closer now to a resolution of that war. I mean, at this point, it's basically status quo. We haven't made any progress, and we've spent trillions on it. So what makes us think the war on terror is going to be any different? It's not, because it's really not a war. It's a phantom enemy that cannot be, it's like a shapeshifter. So we can never actually get the enemy, therefore the war can really never end. But when they passed the original 2012 National Defense Authorization Act, which I might add was passed last year, or in 2012, just around this time of year, I found out something that really bothered me. Surefire, who is at that and was at that time probably the largest vendor for flashlights and military lighting and things like that. Batteries, right? They sell batteries and branded Surefire batteries, Surefire flashlights, rigs and attachments for firearms and suppressors and silencers, as some people call them, and all kinds of things. They're a huge government contractor for our military. And what I found out really burned my shorts. I found out that Surefire spent $175,000 lobbying on behalf of the passage of the National Defense Authorization Act. And I thought to myself, well, let's see. In a scenario where we live in a police state, they're going to require an enormous amount of flashlights and gear and tactical weaponry and things like that, not only internationally, but right here at home, because they're going to have to kick in doors and raid homes and pull people out of bed and, hustle them into a van. And, of course, they do that usually under the dark of night. And it suddenly dawned on me what it was Surefire was paying for. They were buying fascism. They were buying it. From our elected representatives. And our elected representatives sitting there so fat they're overflowing their chair, so drunken with our money and their power that they have no concept of the realities of life for everyone around them. They couldn't wait to shove that morsel in their mouth and swallow it down. Basically, folks, what it comes down to is we are rapidly running out of options here. And where we've come is that we have to make an acknowledgement, a recognition. We have to be cognizant of the fact that now we live in a place where the wholesale abuses and the violations that are perpetuated on us, the livestock of the elites, is being funded by corporations who utilize them as the police force and the legislative passage arm to pass laws that improve their status and situation, purely for greed and power as well. The stage is being set. The lights are primed and they're ready. The actors, they're in the back testing their lines. They're flitting about nervously backstage, all pent up with anxiety. They know the show's about to start. And the American audience is sitting out there in the theater, drifting in and out of awareness and cognizance, and occasionally snaps their head about, and then their eyes get heavy again. And they're snuggled down in their chairs, nice and warm, awaiting the rise of the curtain. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. Please find our website at americasvoicenow.org. Please find us on Facebook at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. Find our YouTube channel at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. Share, share, share. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.